What's going on, you bunch of heathens? We're back with another Megaprojects video. Sorry, I had to double check because I see the guy everywhere. But this one is on Russia's $2 billion submarine that doomed 118 people. You know me, I love like naval disasters, like learning about them because I find them super interesting. And this one caught my eye. So here we are. Make sure you guys check out the original. It's linked down below. Let's jump in.
In August 2000, Russia's Northern Fleet sent its crown jewel, the submarine Kursk, to sea. She was a monster of a boat, double-hulled, nuclear-powered, armed with supersonic carrier killer missiles, and hailed as unsinkable.
Hailed as unsinkable. Lovely. Don't you love them when people hail something as unsinkable? It's you're testing God with the saying like that.
$2 billion symbol of post-Soviet ambition, Kursk was supposed to prove that even in the chaos of the 1990s, Moscow could still field weapons to rival NATO's best. But just 2 days into a showcase exercise, that illusion was violently shattered as a torpedo leak in her forward compartment ignited into a fireball of unimaginable heat. Minutes later, a second detonation ripped through her magazines, obliterating the front of the submarine and hurling the wreck to the seabed. Some crew were killed instantly, others were left trapped in the dark, but none would make it out alive.
God, that is horror right there. Kill me instantly. I don't want to be trapped in a metal tube. It's like on the ocean floor. I do not want that. Especially consider, like, holy shit. We already know the history behind, God, what's it called? Behind. Why am I blanking? The Russian Navy. It's not great. So, yeah, I'm not really feeling up for it.
What should have been a triumphant display of strength instead became a national humiliation, a scandal so raw it helped shape the political career of Vladimir Putin.
Oh, really?
The $2 billion beast. Russia in the 90s was, frankly, bordering on hellish. Helmed by an incompetent drunkard in the form of Boris Yeltsin, the newly independent nation's transition into a market economy had been an absolute calamity. So-called shock therapy reforms, quickly cutting state subsidies and privatizing state industries to force a swift transition to capitalism, had sparked hyperinflation.
I mean, I've heard of Yeltsin, but I actually don't know anything actually like about him. You know? Kind of makes me want to get what's the word I'm looking for? Like maybe look more into him.
Wiped out savings, skyrocketed unemployment, and through all of that, driven millions into poverty. Add in an explosion in corruption at every level of government, brutal wars in Chechnya, the constitutional crisis that led to the parliament building being shelled by tanks, mobsters expanding their operation and acting with near impunity, and the rise of the oligarch class as former Soviet bigwigs manipulated loopholes in poorly thought out privation policy to gobble up vast swaths of the economy for themselves. And yes, you can probably see what we mean when we say that it was bordering on hellish. And
that sounds fucking hellish.
Boris Yeltsin, during rare moments of sobriety, and his wider government were adamant that Russia was one of the big boys on the world stage, just as the Soviet Union had.
I mean, you're really not.
Hence the Kursk, a Project 949A class, known as the Oscar II class in the West, nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine that had been laid down in 1990 before the collapse and commissioned into service in 1994. After the collapse. She was both the crown jewel of the Northern Fleet and
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say ballsy as fuck to still run to like not take a bit more time. Like you just had a whole government collapse. Not taking a bit more time to make sure everything's good on it. I mean, the Soviets were notorious for cutting corners, so kind of a surprise that you didn't
then,
like think about
the
it a bit
Soviet
more.
inheritance that they could barely afford to operate, but that was going to be kept running come hell or high water for the sake of aforementioned ambitions. She was also a big girl, displacing 24,000 tons.
What's the fucking quote that's like, ambitions are like the killer of all or something like that? That's what instantly comes to mind.
Merged, according to Alexander Backer and Lars Walder, in The Salvage of the Kursk, and also stretching 154 meters from nose to stern with a beam of 18.2 meters.
Ooh, she a big girl.
Context made her about as long as 2 747 jumbo jets and roughly as wide as a 5-lane road. Holy
God, she a big bitch.
That's massive. Power came from 2 nuclear reactors, giving her a surface speed of 30 knots and 28 knots submerged. Not bad, really, when at maximum load of 9,500 tons, she weighed about the same as the Eiffel Tower.
Holy
and naturally,
shit!
Thanks to her nuclear propulsion, her range was also unlimited. Essentially, anyway, she'd have to stop from time to time to restock her food supplies. But in real terms,
Yeah.
unlimited. Firepower
Yeah, an
was
actual-
Kursk's true selling point. She carried 18 torpedoes and up to 24 P-700 Granite cruise missiles, SSN-19 shipwrecks in NATO nomenclature. Each Granite was a supersonic, sea-skimming carrier killer, packing a 750-kilogram warhead and flying at Mach 1.5, although
Oh, so
some
fast,
sources
bitch.
report possible top speeds of Mach 2.5. Launch
I don't believe those. 1.5, some claiming 2.5, I don't believe.
in a swarm, they could talk to each other mid-flight through a lead designator missile that flew higher than the rest, took in all the data, observed all variables, and automatically plotted an effective course of attack therefrom. Naturally,
that's
that
cool.
capability was a bit of a big deal at the time, and the P-700 was no
that is
doubt
really
among
cool.
the best anti-ship missiles in the world. Although it has long since been surpassed, both by its own evolution, the P-800 Onyx, and Western designs such as the Naval Strike Missile, which come packed with even fancier capabilities. But while
Fancy.
Kursk's teeth were sharp, her body was tough too. She was double-hulled, an outer casing of austenitic steel, i.e. non-magnetic and corrosion-resistant, and an
Good.
inner-pressure hull 5 centimeters thick. Between them was a gap over 2 meters wide, designed to absorb torpedo hits and collisions. And just because naval artifacts just love to tempt fate, yes, Kursk was described as unsinkable by her designers.
Yet
And
again,
mind you,
so I'm glad he brought it up, because yeah, that's just fucking tempting fate at that point, saying that.
idea who is actually the progenitor of the claim, because while all 4 books we consulted to produce today's episode are adamant it was said, they all fail to mention by whom. As for the compulsory Soviet weirdness for the Kursk, it all came from the fact that her designers actually really put in the effort to make her tolerable, dare we say, even nice to serve on. As Robert Moore put it in A Time to Die, quote, "For the Russian submariner, Kursk was a relatively comfortable boat. She had a sauna, a small recreation room, and even an aquarium. All of that didn't
Why?
come cheap, naturally.
No,
with the
that would not
plunged
be cheap.
palatial palace.
I mean, don't get me wrong, making it so that way it's, you know, nice for the men is a good morale boost. But you're just adding in so much shit. Like, hold up, let me go back.
was a relatively comfortable boat. She had a sauna.
You don't need the aquarium. Honestly, get rid of the aquarium. A rec room and a sauna,
a small
perfectly fine.
recreation room,
If you really
and
want,
even an
like,
aquarium.
that
All of
one specific thing that makes the boat super nice, have the sauna.
that didn't come cheap, naturally, with the plunged palatial palace ultimately costing $1 billion equivalent by the time she was commissioned in 1994, at least
God,
according
$1 billion.
to Moore, which
Holy
would work
shit.
out around $2.1 billion today when adjusted for inflation. Safe to
So
say,
much
then,
fucking
in
money.
that overview, Kursk sounds like a bit of an alright ship, doesn't she? Pretty much a dream for the nascent Russian state, a half-built, top-of-the-line weapon that they just had to put the finishing touches on, which could then serve them diligently for years to come while their wider capabilities absolutely collapsed amidst post-Soviet chaos.
Oh, but what
Except,
happens?
No, we already know that that's not what happens. Good machines don't explode and leave their
Oh,
entire
there we
crew
go. Yeah,
dead
okay.
on the bottom of the sea, do they?
No, they don't.
What Kursk really was a perfect symbol of 90s Russia itself. Impressive looking, heavy with Soviet inheritance, but absolutely riddled with hidden flaws that no one wanted to admit to. She wasn't a dream machine.
Sounds
She
like
was a
Russia
time
just in
bomb a
general.
steel case. And in August 2000, the clock finally stopped ticking. Early problems. The writing really had been on the wall too, because Kursk had far more problems than just the catastrophic one that saw her lost with all hands on that fateful day. The most basic problem was maintenance. By the time she was operational, the Northern Fleet support infrastructure was already crumbling, and with her being commissioned on the 30th of December 1994, it hadn't even been 4 years since the Soviet Union's collapse, which occurred, formally at least, on the 31st of December 1991. Moore's book documents how weapons were loaded at Vidyayevo Naval Base, a modest-sized facility just off the Norwegian and Finnish borders, with rusty, decades-old cranes, and how torpedoes were just manhandled aboard as if the clocks had found themselves wound back to Stalin's time.
Of course.
Crews even joked that safety inspections were mostly paperwork, with officers signing off munitions as fit for use, even when their age and condition suggested otherwise.
Fucking called it. Fucking called it. Like, fucking writing on the wall. Like, why? Why do you need to power? You're brand new, so you think, oh, we need to power project right this fucking instant. No, you don't.
The barely functional government that sometimes even struggled to get their paychecks to them, suddenly going to start taking safety seriously and send a fella into check? No, of course it wasn't. So just sign the bloody paperwork and then back to the mess to put your feet up. And then...
Makes sense, honestly.
Soviet submarines had a long tradition of spontaneously combusting even before Kursk hit the waves. In
Really?
1957, for example, M256 suffered an engine room explosion in the Gulf of Finland, caught fire, and went down, taking 28 of her crew of 35 with her. Then in
Oh my
1962, B-37 moored up at Polyarny Naval Base, suffered an electrical fire in her torpedo room, all 11 cooked off, and 122 lives were lost, with her anchor being recovered from nearly 2 kilometers away. 5 years
Holy
later,
shit.
the Soviet
The explosion's so 2 kilometers? It's fucking insane.
First nuclear-powered sub, incidentally, caught fire while transiting the Norwegian Sea, killing 39, although K3 herself would survive, remaining in service and not being decommissioned until 1988. And then there was K8 in 1970. Nuclear-powered, like K3, she suffered 2 simultaneous fires, and after deactivating her nuclear reactors and ordering to abandon ship, her captain and his crew was ordered to re-embark during towing. 60 of the 104-strong crew wouldn't survive the tow, 8 died by drowning within hastily sealed compartments, and the other 52 through carbon monoxide inhalation. And we could go on.
So nice of the Soviet government. So fucking nice to care about their men.
As there's a steady trickle of incidents like these throughout the entire Soviet period, but
So
you get
fucking
the
many.
idea. And because, as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Kursk carried on the tradition of her forerunners, with Peter Truscott in his book, funnily enough titled Kursk, noting how she suffered a significant electrical blaze in 1994, months before she was even commissioned, as well as
Significant?
multiple
How
other
bad is
onboard
significant?
fires and fire-related accidents that were quietly recorded in naval paperwork and then shoved to the bottom of the filing cabinet so that they could be forgotten about. Sounds safe, doesn't it? In particular, it was her battery spaces, wiring runs, and weapons bays that were the worst for it. Kursk was
So all
supposed
super
to be
important
modern,
shit.
but in reality, she was every bit as flammable as her predecessors. And her emergency systems? They looked good on paper, but failed in practice. Kursk's emergency buoy, designed to float to the surface if she was in distress, had literally been welded shut at the shipyard to stop it discharging accidentally. Her escape...
Oh my god. Who orders that? Hey, this super important bit that's like safety equipment? Yeah, no, it keeps accidentally discharging. Instead of fixing it and figuring out like why it keeps doing that, no. We're just gonna weld it shut so it's useless.
chambers were so poorly designed that Moore concludes they were never actually meant for crew escape at all, only for use with a rescue submersible. Or in other words, if something went awry, you were locked inside of her until someone came to get you, if they came to get you at all. All of this spoke to a deeper problem.
Fucking HOARD.
The culture. As Truscott puts it, Russian naval tradition back then was one of secrecy, denial, and showmanship. Problems weren't reported upwards unless they could be forged into a dagger that could be stuck into the back of someone chasing the same promotion as you. As a result, faults weren't addressed, they were ignored. Captain Gennady Lyachin, Kursk's commanding officer on her fateful final voyage, even had to quite literally beg sailors to stay in service because between the frequent missed pay packets and the increasing feeling that Kursk herself was something of a death trap, many sailors, particularly the conscripts, were well aware of the fact that they could just straight up abandon their service and there was basically no risk of anyone ever trying to hunt them down and drag them back. Now, though,
Holy shit. Russia, stop using They really don't fucking learn.
we arrive at Kursk's worst flaw. The one that ultimately caused her demise, her torpedoes. You see, she carried Type 65-76 kit torpedoes, also dubbed the Fat by sailors, and a load of other potentially demonetizable nicknames therefrom because of their 650mm diameter, which was a darn sight girthier than 530mm of normal
big
Soviet
bitches.
torpedoes like the Type 53. The issue was that they used a form of high-test peroxide, concentrated H2O2, as part of their propulsion and oxidizer system, and that stuff is very volatile. If a tank or pipe leaks or peroxide touches rust, grease, or specific metal surfaces, it can explode into scalding steam and pure oxygen almost instantly. In a packed torpedo tube or compartment, that sudden blast rips casings, sprays burning oxidizer onto nearby gear, and feeds fires. Worse, the shock and heat can also set off adjacent warheads, so a small leak becomes a chain reaction, cooking the whole lot off. This wasn't an unknown thing back then either. The British had learned this lesson the hard way in 1955 when HMS Sidon exploded in Portland Harbor, England at a cost of 13 lives. And if that wasn't bad enough, the Soviets and later the Russians did know about this incident, and it also happened to them, and they just buried their heads in the sand.
That's standard fucking Russian shit. Like, that's pretty fucking standard.
As indeed, there had been 3 fatal accidents prior to the loss of the Kursk.
3?
Oh, and they also barely worked anyway, as between 1977 and 2000, almost a third of all test launches ended in failure. And what's worse than a dangerous and terribly designed torpedo?
One that just doesn't work?
Dangerous and terribly designed torpedo, which the ones aboard Kursk certainly were, having been built in the Kazakh SSR in 1990, modernized in 1993, and then left sitting in storage until 2000 when they were dragged out and had tires kicked and then were loaded aboard. So yes, we think you can all see where this is now going.
Yes, very old.
Fire in the deep. Kursk was participating in the snappily titled Complex Naval Exercises of the Northern Fleet wargame when the disaster struck. It was a grand affair, Russia's biggest naval exercise since the 91 collapse, in fact, and accordingly, all the stops have been pulled out, or as many as the Russian Navy was capable of pulling out back then anyway. More than 30 ships, both surface and submarines, took part, backed by over 7,800 personnel from 2 airborne divisions, 10 land-based army units, and even detachments of the Ukrainian Air Force. It was a different time. Admiral Vyacheslav Popov, commander of the fleet, had a lot riding on the display too. If it looked good and went well, he was tipped for a move up to Moscow and maybe even a shot at commander-in-chief of the entire navy. So the pressure was certainly on. The whole thing had to run like clockwork, and Kursk, the fleet's pride, was meant to be the star of the show. NATO naturally was watching every second as well. The Barents had always been a Cold War playground, and by 2000, with Russia's future relationship with the West still being uncertain, nothing much changed at all. Accordingly, American Los Angeles-class nuclear-powered attack submarines were shadowing the whole thing. The USNS Loyal was hovering about with its hydrophones, and Norway's electronic intelligence collection vessel, Majata, was lingering just outside the exercise box.
That's a cool-looking ship.
Eye on things. Overhead, American P-3 Orions also dropped sonar buoys, satellites ticked away, and Western analysts built up a live, real-time picture of Russia's long-awaited return to big fleet operations. Moscow knew this. And frankly, they weren't mad about it. Let the whole world see the excellence of independent Russia.
Of course.
Very much the mantra. And so it was.
Of course it is.
11th of August, Kursk found itself in the Barents Sea exercise area. She had just completed her first drill, firing off a Granite cruise missile with a dummy warhead, and now her commander, Captain Lyachin, who we met earlier, was waiting for the main event. The plan was simple enough. Line up on the fleet's flagship, Pyotr Veliky, and launch 2 practice torpedoes at her. To begin with, all was looking great. Kursk made her final radio contact at 8:51 a.m. and confirmed both her position and her readiness to fire. The reply from Fleet HQ was one word: dobro, or good. And so, she submerged to periscope depth and
Good.
began stalking
That's it.
her target 30 miles to her north. At 11:28, she had eyes on Piotr Vekely, and orders went out to prepare Tube 4 for the shot. She'd never fire that shot, however, as when the torpedo was moved forward, the hydrogen peroxide inside began leaking through a faulty seal, and in that instant,
Oh,
it
no.
began mixing with all the metal, fuel, and grease that it could find. And of course, that led to detonation. A huge fireball believed to have reached over 8,000 degrees Celsius burst from the torpedo compartment, and because of a sloppy against regulations habit among Russian sailors of not shutting the compartment door to spare their heating, the fireball ripped straight through the submarine, reaching the central command post where Lyachin, his XO, and senior officers were still standing.
Dude.
Everyone in the front end of the Kursk, all of them killed. So intense were the flames that they wouldn't even have had time to process what was happening.
I mean, at least there's that, I guess, but dude, set standards for your fucking men. Don't allow them to fucking slack off on safety measures. Holy shit, homie.
Maybe a second or two for those in the central command post as the fireball worked its way towards them.
They probably heard it. It was probably in the middle of processing what was that by the time it reached them.
But when it reached them, they were gone in an instant. Emergency alarms didn't even have time to sound before most of the Kursk's leadership was dead. And then, 2 minutes later at 11:30, as the surviving crew towards the rear were scrambling for oxygen masks, there was a second explosion. All the torpedoes in the magazine had cooked off thanks to the damage of the earlier fireball, and they exploded with a detonation equivalent to 3 to 5 tons of TNT. Seismographs across Northern Europe lit up at magnitude 3.5, and in an instant, compartments 1 through 4 of the Kursk simply seized.
It rang as a 3.5 earthquake? That's a fucking massive explosion.
One moment they were there, the next moment they were gone. From there, Kursk, or what was left of her, lurched backwards from the force of the explosion and then nosedived toward the seabed, which she impacted at 11:32, bow first, port side down. Miraculously, though, some 40 of 118 souls on board that day had survived. All of them men who had, through pure luck, just happened to be in the rear of the ship, both not in compartments 1 through 4 and beyond the reach of the initial fireball. They retreated ever rearwards, choking on fumes and sealing hatches behind them once the cries for help faded. Eventually,
oh, that's
depressing. They had been pushed back to compartment 9, the final compartment of the ship. That 40 had become 23, and Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov, the most senior surviving officer, took charge once initial surges of adrenaline had calmed.
You lost almost half your remaining survivors getting back to the... Oh, that's depressing.
At some point, he scribbled out this note, clearly understanding that he was likely not making it off Kursk. Olya, I love you. Don't worry too much. Leisha, Misha, greetings to you. Kisses. Later.
Motherfucker. Just seeing that makes me want... Oh my god, I'm tearing up. That's sad. That's you know you're not making it off, so it's, hey, last note to your wife and kids. Hey, don't worry. And hey, you two, kisses. Like, oh, that's I'm gonna cry.
In pitch black darkness, thanks to the power failing and lit only by the faint glow of his wristwatch, he added this more formal addendum. It's very dark to write, but I'll try by touch. It seems there are no chances. 10 to 20%. Let's hope someone will read this. Here is the list of the personnel from sections 6, 7, and 8 who have moved into the 9th compartment. We will try to get out. Regards to everyone, don't despair. Kolesnikov. A senior warrant officer named Andrei Borislov too penned a letter, sealing it within a bottle to ensure its survival. As far as we can tell too, this one has never been published in English before, with us only being able to find it by digging deep through Rambler, a Russian language news aggregator. My dear Natasha.
Wait, we finally see... Oh no, not another good... Oh.
And our son Sasha. If you have this letter, it means I am gone. I love you both very much. Natasha, forgive me for everything. Sasha, be a man. I kiss you tightly. Ultimately.
God, that's... I hate goodbye letters because it's so sad. They are always so fucking sad.
They tried everything to survive. Emergency food was gathered up, chemical oxygen candles were popped, immersion suits were donned, but the situation was hopeless. batteries were dead, and every breath drawn drained the compartment of oxygen and replaced it with carbon dioxide. And then, sometime later, specifically when is unknown, they attempted to recharge the oxygen system and a regeneration cartridge reacted with seawater. A flash fire tore through the compartment, burning 3 of the survivors alive and consuming what little oxygen remained.
Oh no.
Quickly, no longer than a minute later, all aboard Kursk had perished. When divers finally opened the aft hatch
That's sad.
2 months later,
2
they found
months?
bodies huddled in the dark, some still in immersion suits.
2 months. Why did it take 2 months for you to finally get there? Jesus Christ. What? 2 months.
Kalashnikov's note was folded inside his clothing, pressed close to his heart.
2 months.
Chaos on the surface.
It's ridiculous.
And worst of all, it did not have to end that way. Kolesnikov and all of his comrades trapped in Compartment 9 could have been saved, but a cacophony of blunders ensured that they weren't. To begin explaining,
Standard fucking
remember that
shit.
culture of burying problems that we mentioned earlier? When word reached Admiral Popov that Kursk had likely been lost, pretty much immediately, in fact, as the radio silence and very notable explosion made it rather obvious,
Yeah.
he hesitated and deferred for hours, completely refusing to even acknowledge that there was a problem.
Fuck you,
much less commit
Popov.
to a rescue effort. And when he did finally admit there was a crisis, the Northern Fleet's rescue assets were called into action, although they were only really rescue assets in the most abstract sense, as Russia's Priz-class rescue mini-subs hailing from the 1980s weren't exactly what you would call well-maintained, and so they failed on every attempt to mate with the Kursk's escape hatch.
For fuck's sake. It always. Can you... if they were still alive, because I don't... If they were still alive, can you imagine hearing them trying to get to the escape hatch, trying to mate with it and dock with it, and just hearing them leave every fucking time? That is so depressing to think about.
Not that that would have mattered by that point anyway. Even if they had managed to mate with the Kursk, Popov's dithering had ensured that everyone inside was already
Okay,
dead.
so they were already
Meanwhile,
dead.
the fleet told the families nothing.
Of course not.
Vidyayevo, Kursk's home base, incidentally, wives and mothers gathered in the officers' club demanding answers. Instead, they got rumors. One day, it was a collision with an American submarine. The next, it was a freak accident. Then it was nothing to worry about at all. The truth that their sons and husbands were trapped at the bottom of the Barents Sea was simply withheld. And where was President Boris Yeltsin during all of this? Well, he was retired, actually, as he got booted out of office in 1999. His successor, however, is a chap you might have heard of, Vladimir Putin, and he was on
this
holiday in
cunt.
Sochi. He soaked up another 5 days of sun and then headed back to Moscow. His absence was noted by the Russian people too.
Yeah, don't you love that? Hey, big fucking emergency is happening. Like, the pride of our fucking naval submarines. Hey, we fucking lost it. No, we need like emergency. Now I'm gonna stay an extra fucking 5 days and then I'll come home.
It was his first true crisis of his tenure, and he absolutely flunked it. From
Yeah,
there,
he
the
already
cover-up
fucked it up.
continued. Official briefings claimed that contact had been made with Kursk's crews, that tapping could be heard from inside the hull. Some reports even said sailors were signaling back with Morse code. It was fantasy. The survivors
Of course it is.
Compartment 9 had been dead for days by then. The Navy knew it, but they lied to the families anyway, desperate to buy time and avoid blame. The charade, however, collapsed on August the 20th, 8 days after the sinking, as Norwegian divers finally opened the aft escape hatch. They found Compartment 9 completely
9 days. Norwegian. It wasn't even Russians. It was Norwegians who did it.
lifeless. The game was up, and so Moscow admitted what everyone else already knew. Kursk's crew had not survived. The reaction at home was fury. Television cameras captured scenes
I'd be
in
furious
video
too.
of sobbing women being restrained as admirals tried to placate them. One widow famously screamed at Deputy Prime Minister Ilya Klebanov live on air, "Where were you when my husband was dying?" Another hurled herself at a naval officer, clawing at his medals.
That's-
The mask of control slipped, and the state's indifference was laid bare. Ultimately, the Kursk was far more than just a basket case of a submarine that was lost in an absolutely tragic circumstance. It was a political scandal, a national humiliation, and a very public autopsy of post-Soviet decline. As Truscott puts it, the loss was seen as a blow to already diminished self-confidence and national pride. It was the moment post-Soviet Russia looked itself in the mirror and didn't like what it saw. Their navy had once terrified NATO, and now they couldn't even conduct a single decently sized exercise without losing one of their headline vessels, along with all souls aboard. Quoting Truscott again,
while
"It was a
trying to
metaphor
hide it
for Russia's overblown desire to be a great power, a state-of-the-art boat that the country could not afford to maintain and equip, a watershed that punctured old illusions." The Kremlin, of course, tried to blur the edges. They floated conspiracy theories about American subs, whispered about freak accidents, even suggested an old mine might be to blame. But the reality was simpler and far uglier.
Yep.
Russia's
Try to blame it on the
finest boat had been
Americans.
sunk by its own rotting systems, its own culture of denial, its own incompetence. And the damage wasn't just reputational. For the families left behind, the lies and the dithering were crueler than the explosions. Their husbands, brothers, and sons suffocated in the dark while admirals stalled, ministers lied, and the president himself hid behind silence. Trust between Russia's people and its leaders cracked that summer, and for many, it never healed. Yet in
As
another
it
sense,
shouldn't.
Kursk's death was formative. Putin, chastened by his flailing response, learned the lesson. Never look weak again. He later conceded, "I probably should have returned to Moscow. From a PR point of view, I could have demonstrated some special eagerness to return." And the other lesson came quickly.
Yeah, but
He was to secure his own power.
that right there, that just proves that he just doesn't care. Like, that's all I see right there is that, yeah, he didn't really actually care.
He needed to exert full control over Russia's major independent media, which is why within 18 months, the Kremlin effectively controlled all 3 major television stations. Thus, the shirtless strongman, the cold operator, the decisive commander who's not afraid to start a war or 3, the carefully crafted image he now puts out to the world. It was in no small part forged in the Barents Sea by a steel ghost that continues to haunt Russia to this very day.
It should. That should absolutely fucking haunt you fuckers. God, I always get upset. Well, that was Russia's $2 billion submarine that doomed 118 men. The little notes were the most depressing part about all of it. Make sure you guys check out the original. Like, comment, subscribe. Till next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.